Coming up on It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System, you'll learn about why a team of doctors from Gunderson happens to be traveling to Nicaragua to help women there. Also, body image and the language we all use when talking body image is something we need to do a better job of communicating. We'll explain. And a bit later, Gunderson Health System has a reputation for green energy projects. What's working well and what new projects are in the works. That's all next on It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System.
Dear Gunderson, like any child, my son Joey was extremely nervous before ear tube surgery. But Dr. Seek had a surprise for us. He told my son that he would wake up after surgery with a dinosaur tattoo, and we would have to find it. This caring and creative idea turned my son's fear into a smile. Thank you for showing us what love plus medicine really means. Sincerely, Joey's mom, Alicia. P.S. The tattoo was hidden on the bottom of his foot.
Welcome back to It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System. I'm Chris Stauffer. Global Partners makes trips really in 3 different locations, really throughout the world: Africa, Nicaragua, and Pine Ridge. And one of the places that Dr. Dana Benden goes to on a regular basis to address a variety of health needs is Nicaragua. Joining us is Dr. Dana Benden to talk a little bit about what they do down there. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Cervical cancer. That's what your focus is when you go to Matagalpa. Why cervical cancer and why Matagalpa?
So Nicaragua actually has one of the highest death rates from cervical cancer in the world. And when Global Partners was trying to establish their initial sites for where we would go and do outreach and volunteerism in the medical field, we looked for an area that was underserved, and we looked for different medical initiatives that really needed to be addressed and were priorities of the country that we were in. So when looking, Nicaragua was identified, and in particular northern Nicaragua, which is where Matagalpa is a very underserved community in Nicaragua. So in northern Nicaragua, it's a more rural community. It is not very well served by medical providers, and there's not a lot of support for patients in that area. So in establishing the site, that's how we chose Matagalpa. We have worked very hard to try to align with the government and their healthcare system and different organizations that are working in that country on a regular basis to try to really help support the work and teach and train the providers that are there in that area. And it is very clear that cervix cancer is a problem. And it's both an access problem and an equipment and resource problem. So we had partnered with a clinic called Clínica Fara that is in Matagalpa, and their primary goal was to really try to decrease cervix cancer in that region. And they are a great organization that has been provided to women either free of charge or very minimal charge. They have asked us to help with training and with the capacity to be able to see patients and screen for cervix cancer, treat precancerous lesions, and help to do some treatment of women when they are diagnosed with cervix cancer.
You're going to be going down in June, June 22nd, I believe. There's other trips planned for later in the year, and we're going to talk a little bit more about how others can get involved in not necessarily just talking about cervical cancer, but in educational opportunities. But I want to talk about what's a day like when you, as a provider, go down in June. What is a typical day going to be like for you?
So a typical day when we're working with our partners at Clínica Fara is screening patients who might have had an abnormal Pap test, which is a screening test for cervix cancer. We might do biopsies and treatments for precancerous lesions. We perform cystoscopy. We also partner with an organization called Lily Project in Nicaragua, and we go to much more rural communities. We work in a building that usually doesn't have electricity or water running, and we will screen patients in that facility really closer to their home, because a lot of the barrier of women getting screening tests and treatments is really the proximity to care. So in working with Lilly Project, Global Partners really goes out to the rural area. We see patients where they live, and we do it in more rustic settings, but are still able to help provide them great care. We also work with the medical personnel in that region to help train them so that they feel comfortable doing the screening tests.
I want to talk more about that training. We're talking with Dr. Dana Benden, Gunderson Health System, and her trip getting ready to go in June 22nd for Global Partners. The training is a key component because at some point you're going to leave and the team is going to leave. But what you want to leave behind is the knowledge that you bring with you. Can you chat about how important that is for the Matagalpa region?
Absolutely. Global Partners as an organization is really dedicated to teaching and trying to have a sustainable effort. And so in order to have a sustainable effort, you really have to be able to provide education and training to the individuals that are providing the care in the area. We go to Nicaragua 4 to 5 times a year, but all of those other days that we are not there, we want the skills that we have to be able to be translated and performed by their own providers. So we do go back to the same area. We work with the same providers until we feel like they have gained the knowledge that they need and really they feel comfortable in providing that care.
Talk, if you would, about when you go down, why you go down. I know you're going to say, oh, it's for the patients and the families that are in that area, but there's something that the team is getting out of that. What is that?
So for me, I had a very close colleague whose name was Dr. Rick Renwick, and he was very dedicated to Nicaragua. He actually did a medical school experience there. And Dr. Renwick was actually scheduled to go to Nicaragua to launch this cervix cancer prevention program. And unfortunately, Dr. Renwick died tragically in a plane accident. He was a very close friend of mine and a mentor, and I looked up to him, and I did not want his legacy to die. So he really inspired me to kind of fill into his shoes and the void that he left behind. And I'm very happy that he did. It is a great experience as a medical provider and a volunteer to see a different atmosphere, to work in different settings. People are very grateful. It's very rewarding, oftentimes more for the volunteers than it is for the people we're teaching. It really gives you a different perspective of what we're grateful for and what resources we have and how we can use resources a little bit better.
I want to warn people that this is not a vacation. When you go down there, you're working very hard, long days. But there are other opportunities if you don't happen to be a surgeon, but there are other educational opportunities that you're encouraging folks to learn more about through Global Partners and potentially go along to places like Nicaragua, to Africa, and to Pine Ridge.
Yeah, we have roles for many different, different opportunities for different volunteers depending on what skill you have. We have many teachers that travel with us. We have many non-medical personnel that come with us. And there are different trips that people might fit into better. But I think that it's really a great experience. We oftentimes have college-age students or different people that are coming in and just learning about the project. We partner with Rotary in La Crosse and different organizations, and they might volunteer with us also to have that interface of what it's like to work on a project.
Making a difference in Matagalpa, Nicaragua. I really appreciate your time here today, and good luck on the trip in June and the trips this fall as well.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Dana Benden, and if you'd like to learn more about Global Partners, you can go to the Gunderson Health System website. Look for the foundation. You can search that right on the Gunderson Health System website. That's gundersonhealth.org. When we come back, body image and the language we all use when talking about body image is something we need to work on and communicate better. We'll explain. That's next on It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System.
Mình sẽ na yêu một tay đơn lên Unless you're from Ethiopia, you won't fully understand this, but you might gather that 9-year-old Abo is excited. Thanks to our eye doctors volunteering with Gunderson Global Partners, he can now see his friends at the new school and a future worth living. It's just one of the ways Gunderson Health System is combining love plus medicine. Learn how you can help at gundersonhealth.org/global partners.
Welcome back to It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System. I'm Chris Stauffer. Well, when it comes to talking about dieting, how do you talk about it? Jessica Lind, registered dietitian, nutrition therapy at Gunderson Health System, is joining us to talk about the 3 things to stop saying about body image. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So, first of all, talking about body image, I think some of us are reluctant. And what I mean by that is you sometimes want to give a compliment to a coworker, you want to give a compliment to your daughter, a friend, and you're saying that it might not always be a great idea to mention body image. Why is that?
Yeah, so we want to give compliments to people. We want them to we want to recognize them for the things that we feel like they're doing well. And humans are visual creatures, so we oftentimes find ourselves complimenting on the way people look. Even when it's meant to be a positive compliment, it can sometimes be inhibitory to people meeting their goals, and part of that is having a good body image.
Interesting. Now, one of the things that you said that you might not want to say is it looks like you've lost weight.
Yeah.
Now, again, that seems to me like, I haven't seen my daughter in, a month. She comes in, hey, hon, you look like you've lost weight. And you're saying, not a great idea.
Maybe not so much. Yeah. So this kind of whole conversation came about because it was recently Eating Disorder Awareness Month or Eating Disorder Awareness Week, excuse me. And one of the things that is really hits home to folks who have eating disorder behaviors is being complimented on any weight loss that they have. And so when you compliment somebody on their weight loss, especially when you have no knowledge of what led to that weight loss, you're kind of subconsciously justifying the means by which someone lost weight. And there are a lot of really unhealthy ways to do that. And so it can lead people down the path of continuing on destructive behaviors for the purpose of weight loss to gain those compliments.
Now, I know there's going to be somebody out there, there's a skeptic out there going, but if I see that somebody's lost weight, that seems like a positive in their life, and I want to recognize that. But you're saying that behavior might not be.
Interestingly, they've done research on this, and we found that commenting on the way people look, whether it is a positive or negative comment, is inhibitory to their body image, because it just reminds them that people are noticing. And so for people who already that hits so close to home for them, that's a really, really big part of their conscious thought during the day, to be reminded that other people are noticing that about them too, can potentially be really destructive for them.
All right. Some of the other things that people should stop saying about body image, I think you said something about going on a diet.
Yeah, going on a diet, getting rid of that one out of your
Explain
vocabulary.
what that means. How does that come up in a conversation? I haven't personally heard that one.
Sure. So
are you going on a diet? Is that a question that you shouldn't bring up? Is that,
So setting the scene for you, maybe it's Thanksgiving dinner time, everyone's sitting around, Aunt Carol had that extra slice of pie, and she says to herself, and within earshot of the rest of the table, well, I'll just have the extra piece of pie. I'm going on a diet on Monday, so it's fine. And just the whole concept of going on a diet is a tough one, because in our culture, we kind of think of a diet as being the healthy thing to do. You're going on a diet, you're doing the right thing for your body. But really, rather than focusing on using your eating habits on a short-term basis to promote weight loss in yourself, fueling your body appropriately with the nutrients and the energy it needs all the time, regardless of whether health is your main focus at that point or not.
Still thinking about this in a everyday kind of a capacity where you're constantly thinking about the fuel that is going into your body versus I'll diet tomorrow.
Right, exactly. And using the food as fuel rather than a means by which to decrease your body size.
We're talking with Jessica Lind, registered dietitian, nutrition therapy at Gunderson Health System, about the things that you should stop saying about body image. So we got two.
Yep.
There's a third. What's the third? So
the third phrase that we're talking about in terms of to stop saying to improve your body image is this food a good food or a bad food? And we tend to take foods and minimize them down to one nutrient that they contain and then decide whether that food is a good food or a bad food in terms of our health. And that's a no-no when it comes to properly fueling your body.
All right, so it doesn't necessarily matter if it's a bad food if you're having it in a limited capacity.
Exactly.
Or this is just, a small portion.
Yep. So portion control is going to be important, and the reason why portion control is important is that brings up the concept of why are you eating that food. So if you're eating a food to satisfy a craving or an emotion, or using food as a fix to a different problem rather than the need for fuel, that food becomes unhealthy because the behavior is unhealthy.
Excellent point. So the three things to stop saying about body image: going on a diet, looks like you've lost weight, and is this food a good food or a bad food? Is this food a good food or a bad food? So something to at least consider as you push forward and try and eat healthy. Right?
Absolutely.
All right, Jessica, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Jessica
Thank you.
Lind, registered dietitian, nutrition therapy. If you'd like to learn more about nutrition, certainly go to the Gunderson Health System website. That's gundersonhealth.org. When we come back, Gunderson Health System has a reputation for green energy projects. We're going to find out what's working well and what new projects happen to be in the works. That's next on It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System.
House calls aren't typical anymore. But as a Gunderson cardiologist, I do the next best thing: outreach visits to my patients in rural clinics and hospitals. I love that I can bring care closer to home, especially when they're ill or the weather is not good.
At Gunderson Health System, our doctors go the extra mile, or 60, to provide care for patients. It's the driving force behind love plus medicine. Learn more about Gunderson hospitals and clinics at gundersonhealth.org.
Welcome back to It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System. I'm Chris Stauffer. Well, when a lot of people think about Gunderson Health System, one of the things that is creeping in more and more is green, whether it's green energy or opportunities to save money by going green. Talking about that here today is Alan Eber. He is the Director of Facility Operations at Gunderson Health System. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Let's talk about some of the projects that Gunderson has undertaken. And one that is, I know you've talked about several times, that is super successful, actually isn't even on the Gunderson campus in La Crosse. It's in Sparta. Can you talk about the success of the new Sparta Clinic?
Yeah, this is the first building that we designed and built since we achieved our first day of energy independence in 2014, where the organization said we want to continue down that path and make all of our buildings energy neutral. So in the design and construction of that building, we spent a lot of time and effort working towards that end. And what we're seeing here after being operational for 1 year is we are well along that way to be energy independent for that specific building.
What makes the Sparta Clinic stand out? I know you've got solar, just energy efficiency. There's just so many different things. And I from what I understand, you kind of set the bar, and you've kind of jumped way above the bar as far as being energy independent in that facility.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about being energy independent when you talk about a specific building. And the first is you have to make it extraordinarily efficient itself. The building itself has to use very little energy. So what we do when we design new buildings is we set specific targets for our architects and engineers to achieve. And the targets that we've really been looking at are about half of what the average building in this area achieves. So for Sparta, for example, a typical building there would be we use BTUs, which is a form of energy, a measurement of energy. And what a typical building like that would typically be is 70, 75 kBTU per square foot. Well, we gave our architects and engineers the challenge of designing it to 35 kBTU per square foot.
How did they react to that?
When we started doing this, people are a little hesitant and talk about how they can't do it. But as they come on board and we look for opportunities, they ultimately they get pretty excited and want to strive towards those goals. This is a challenge for everybody. And when we are hitting these challenges, it's exciting for everybody to do that. So they turn around and they get on board with us as we move forward.
So you set the challenge at 35 kBTU?
Yes.
And how did they do?
They did better than we expected. We had some energy models that were created for this so we could predict what we would get. And what we're seeing is we're actually better than what the energy models were predicting, and the prediction was 35. So we're on a run rate right now of about 33 kBtu per square foot for the building energy itself.
The beautiful thing about that is then it's saving energy. We certainly know that, but it's saving money for patients and for employers in this region.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about this as a two-sided green. One, we're trying to reduce our fossil fuel emissions. The second is we believe, and not only do we believe, I think we've proven that we can do this while saving money for our patients and customers.
So let's talk a little bit about what's in Sparta. We've got solar, you've got things like glass, simple things like that. What other things are, well, first of all, I should have you explain those two things, but what other things are in the building that is making it so energy efficient?
Well, in the design of the building, in order to get to this 35 kBtu per square foot, there were some outside of the box things that we needed to do. The first thing that we do is we look at the insulation and the materials used to build the walls and the ceilings and the floors and make sure that we don't lose heat that we already have or lose cooling that we already have. So we keep the energy we want inside the building and keep the energy we don't want outside of the building with the fenestration of it. So that's step one. Step two is as we were looking at this building, air volume is a big factor in the efficiency of it. So we found a very good way to reduce the amount of air energy that we had to put into the air to move it around. And we did this with what we're calling, or what is called, distributed heat pumps. So in this building, there are over 30 heat pumps in specific locations, so we don't have to move the air from one end of the building back to the center and then right back out to that building. We keep the air on that side of the building and recirculate it and condition it in that area. And that also, we bring in outdoor air through a very efficient method, which is we take the energy that's already inside of the building, and as we're exhausting it, we take that energy and put it right back into the outside air that's coming in, so we don't have to add energy to it using fossil fuels or any other sort of method. And probably the biggest thing that we did is we're using a geothermal well. So all of the heat that comes into that building is coming through the geothermal well. And all of the heat that's in the building that we're getting rid of is going right back into the ground through that geothermal well. So it's kind of an energy storage device for us. In the summertime, we throw energy out there, and in the wintertime, we go back and grab it and bring it inside the building.
Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's fine and dandy because you're able to put the upfront costs and you're able to, afford that. What would you say to those folks?
We're going to have this building for 50 years. So if you take a look at the cost of a building associated with that 50-year life of the building, it's about 25% of the cost is in construction. 75% of that building cost is in the operation of the building for the rest of that time. So it doesn't make sense to be short-sighted on the construction of the building when you have that 75% opportunity in the rest of the time that you're going to be in that building. So we're seeing paybacks on these energy efficiencies less than 7 years. When we have a 7-year payback on a 50-year building, that's a pretty easy decision to make.
Absolutely, and we all know energy costs are not necessarily going down either, right?
That's correct.
We're talking with Alan Eber. He's the Director of Facility Operations at Gunderson Health System. I want to talk to you about some of the things that are happening on the La Crosse campus specifically, some big success stories there. Many people are not aware that wood chips are utilized on the La Crosse campus. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is really a great project that we have here at Gunderson. In 2013, we started heating every building in our La Crosse campus with wood instead of using natural gas, which was quite an interesting challenge. People thought about, well, how in the world are you going to burn wood in downtown La Crosse to heat your hospital? But we're able to do it, and we've done it very successfully for the past 5 years. So what we do is, instead of burning natural gas, we have a boiler, and we put wood inside of that boiler, and we burn the wood, and we make enough steam to heat our entire facility in downtown La Crosse until it gets to be about 30 degrees outside. Then we need to supplement that one boiler with some other natural gas boilers. And the beautiful part about this project for me, the thing that I get most excited about, is we get to work with suppliers within a 50-mile radius of La Crosse. So instead of buying this natural gas from states other than Wisconsin and people that have no idea who Gunderson is, we get to buy our energy source from people within a 50-mile radius that actually come and use our facility. So to me, that's one of the best parts of this whole project.
So wood chips is really what you're using. It's not, it's not something you're cutting out in the back 40. It's actually wood chips that are coming from. Maybe you can even share where they're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so everybody knows, there has never been a tree cut down for us to burn wood for our hospital. The wood that we get all come from, we have 6 different sources, and they're all local. They all do the same thing. They all take rough cut lumber from the woods, and they make lumber for other places for it. Now, as they're making lumber comes in rectangles, and trees are round. So there's scraps that are associated with making that lumber. So what they do is they take their scraps, they make chips out of them, and then we work with the trucking company to bring those chips over to our campus, and that's what we burn.
Pretty amazing stuff, and it's something that I know you've given several tours to people very interested in learning more about that process. But you mentioned the boiler system. One of the most energy efficient things that you can possibly imagine, because you're burning wood,
right,
and you're heating the campus, heating and cooling the campus.
Yes, and we do more than just heat our campus with that project. The other thing we do is it's a combined heat and power. So the steam that we make at a high pressure, and then we put that through a steam turbine generator. So we're actually take that high pressure steam and then deliver lower pressure steam, and with the energy through that, we make electricity. And that electricity we put right back on our facility. So we're not just heating our facility, but we're also providing a substantial amount of electricity that we no longer have to purchase from the utilities, and we no longer have to burn fossil fuel for, because this is coming from a renewable resource.
Do people believe you when you tell them that wood chips are used to,
the people that haven't heard anything about it, they're like, there's no way you're burning wood in downtown La Crosse to heat your hospital. But then when you show them the wood, they're all in awe. It's really fun to give tours of that facility.
We're talking with Alan Eber, Director of Facility Operations at Gunderson Health System. I want to talk to you about, if we can, geothermal, because underneath a parking lot at Gunderson Health System, there are some geothermal, what do you want to call them, tubes?
Yeah, we call them wells, and what they are is they're basically large hoses that have good thermal conductivity, and they go down in the ground 400 feet and then come back up. And the purpose of them is to transfer energy from the water. So if we're trying to cool our buildings, what we do is we send warm water out to that geothermal well, and as it goes underground, it'll take that warm water and transfer the heat out into the ground and come back a little bit cooler. And with that cooler water, it's a much more efficient way for us to cool our building. And in the summertime, we do exactly the opposite. We send cold water out there, and it warms up through the ground a little bit, and then we can take that energy through heat in the water and turn that around and very efficiently heat our buildings.
What's next on the plate for Gunderson Health System? What other projects are potentials out there for opportunity?
Well, what we have started doing, and what we will continue to do, is when we do build new buildings or do remodels, we work extremely hard to make them as efficient as possible. So every building that we build will be better than 50% of the national average for energy efficiency. The other thing that has happened in the last 4 years for sure is solar prices have come down to where that's becoming a fairly reasonable payback for us. We didn't go down that road before because the paybacks on them weren't great, and we are starting to look at more places where we can do solar projects. In fact, we're going to start a project here in May where we put some solar on a building here in La Crosse and feed that power right back into our facilities.
I'm sure that's the behavioral health building.
Yes,
I've already heard that.
Building.
Now, I also know that the Onalaska Clinic has almost a farm on top of the clinic of solar panels.
We don't quite call it a farm; we call it a garden. But you could, that one's about the size of a farm, I guess. In fact, what we've learned is at the time that we installed it, it was the largest privately owned solar garden with our utilities, that was connected to our utilities. But still, even though it's connected to our utilities, we're taking all of that power and putting it right back into our clinic up in Onalaska, yeah.
All right, if you want to learn more about any of these projects, you can certainly go to the Gunderson Health System website. That's gundersonhealth.org. And that wraps it up for this edition of It's Personal, brought to you by Gunderson Health System. I'm Chris Doffer. Thanks for joining us.